Well, hi everyone. My name is Jeff Bartley. I'm a solutions architect here at AWS on the DataSync team, and I'm excited to talk to you today about how AWS DataSync can help you rapidly migrate your data online into the cloud. So today we're going to start off talking about why we built AWS DataSync, and then we'll talk about what it is and how it works for a little bit. And then we'll go into a demo where we'll do a deep dive into various features of DataSync, how it works. We'll run through a number of transfer tasks and show you how easy it is to use DataSync to migrate your data into the cloud. And once the demo is complete, we'll go through some architectural guidance that'll help you as you apply DataSync in your workflows, kind of give you some guidance about how to use the service. And then from there, we'll finish up with some additional resources that you can reference as you want to learn more about the service. So the challenge that DataSync was built to solve is that as more and more customers are moving their workloads into the cloud, increasingly the size of the data sets that they need to move are growing substantially. You know, there's so much data being generated on premises today, and customers need to bring that data into the cloud for various reasons, and DataSync is designed to help them do that. Now, there are a number of use cases that we found that need online data transfer. One such use case is for the migration of application data. Customers have applications that utilize file data, and when they want to migrate those applications to the cloud, they also need to move the application file data as well. A second use case involves getting data into the cloud for processing, whether it's customers running media rendering workflows in the cloud, or analysis of autonomous vehicle data, or processing of seismic data, or analyzing genome sequences. Customers are using the cloud to expand their ability to process and analyze large amounts of data. A third use case involves customers who are looking to free up some of their on-premises storage capacity. A lot of file data out there today is cold. That means it's not accessed that often, but it's frequently being stored in expensive Tier 1 storage systems. Customers are looking to move that data into the cloud, where it can be stored durably and reliably, allowing them to free up their on-premises storage capacity, or even shut down legacy storage systems. And then a fourth use case is where customers want to replicate their on-premises data into the cloud for added data protection and recovery in the case of disaster. This could be a one-time copy, or it could be an ongoing continuous replication. Now, we've all copied a few files here and there. It's pretty easy to do. But when you start looking at copying hundreds of thousands or even millions of files, there's a lot you need to consider. For instance, what transfer protocol should you use? Do you have enough resources to actually transfer the data? Are you going to compress the data in transfer? Do you need to preserve file system metadata? Do you need to be able to scale out the transfer? How are you going to handle security? And don't forget about validation. You want to make sure that all of your data was transferred properly. Now, it's possible to write your own tools to do this on your own, but it takes a significant amount of work. In fact, we had one customer tell us that they spent over $30,000 just writing tools to validate that their data ended up in S3 as expected. Now, that's a significant investment. So after hearing from our customers about some of the challenges they were facing with trying to transfer data into AWS, we realized there was an opportunity to help them by removing a lot of the undifferentiated heavy lifting that comes with building your own migration tools. So we built AWS DataSync, which is a fully managed service for online transfer of data to and from AWS. Now, performance is critical to any migration tool, and DataSync has been built for speed. In fact, it runs up to 10 times faster than common open source tools, utilizing compression, parallel transfer, and other optimizations to get your data to the cloud as fast as possible. In particular, DataSync was purpose-built to handle the challenge of migrating millions or even billions of small files, a task that can be particularly difficult for do-it-yourself solutions. We also wanted to make DataSync easy to use by allowing customers to get up and running quickly, focusing on the task of getting their data to the cloud rather than having to build their own tools. Security is our top priority here at AWS, and we built DataSync to transfer data securely and reliably. DataSync encrypts data in flight and supports encryption at rest on S3 and EFS. In addition, DataSync provides a number of options for validating your data, making sure that all data was transferred successfully. DataSync integrates with common cloud management tools such as CloudWatch, CloudTrail, IAM, and others. And finally, DataSync was designed to be cost-effective. There are third-party offerings on the market today that offer many of the features that DataSync provides, but at a significantly higher price point. So how does DataSync work? Well, you start by deploying an agent on premises in a VMware environment, and then you connect that agent to your shared file system, whether that's over NFS or SMB protocols. And then you decide where you want your data to be transferred. That could be S3 or EFS. And we recently added support for S3 storage classes. So not only can you copy data into S3 standard, but you can copy it into other storage classes such as intelligent tiering or Glacier Deep Archive. Once you've decided your source and your destination locations, you then create a task, and that task will automatically take care of moving the data or copying the data from your on-premises file system up into the cloud. So with that, let's jump into our demo. And for our demo scenario today, what I have is I have an NFS server. And within that NFS server, I have 3 folders. I have a miscellaneous data folder, I have a cold data folder, and I have a folder called many files. Now the data that's in the miscellaneous data folder, some of it I want to copy up into the cloud, some of it I don't want to copy. But I want the data to go into EFS because I have applications running in AWS that need a file system to talk to. And they want to talk to this miscellaneous data. In the cold data folder, I've got files that haven't been accessed for a long time. I need to hold on to them for retention purposes, but I don't really need to make them accessible that often. So I'm going to copy them into S3, and specifically, I'm going to put them into Glacier Deep Archive to save myself some money. And then I also have the many files folder, which, as the name suggests, has a lot of files in it. I also want to move these files into S3, but I want them to be accessible because I'm going to have another application running in the cloud that's going to be accessing these files fairly often for processing. And so I'm going to put those into S3 standard. So our demo scenario today will cover using DataSync to copy files from these 3 folders to their destinations, either EFS or S3. Now the architecture that I've deployed is I've deployed in 2 regions. So in my on-premises region, I've deployed an NFS server, and I've pre-populated it with the folders and files that I mentioned previously. I've also deployed 2 DataSync agents in that same region. I'm putting them close to my NFS server to minimize the latency between my agents and my source data. And then in my destination region, which is the Ohio or US East 2 region, I've created an EFS file system and an S3 bucket. So with that, let's jump into our demo and let's take a look first at some of the resources that have been deployed. So here I am, I'm in my Northern California region, that's representing my on-premises environment. And using CloudFormation, I deployed my 2 DataSync agents and my NFS server. You can see the IP addresses for those here. We'll reference those in a little bit as we start using DataSync. In my Ohio region, I deployed an EFS file system. You can see that here. And I also have my S3 bucket called All Data Bucket, then with a unique identifier at the end to make sure that the bucket name is unique. Right now, there's nothing in the bucket, it's empty. We'll fill that with data as we go through our demo. And then, as I mentioned, I also deployed an NFS server. So I'm going to switch over to my command line here and take a look at what I've got. So if I run the command show mount -E, that'll tell me all the NFS exports that I have on my NFS server. So right now I just have one export. It's exporting /media/data, and I'm in that directory right now. And if I do an ls, you can see I've got those 3 folders that I mentioned previously: cold data, many files, and miscellaneous data. In the miscellaneous data directory, you'll see we've got some JPEG files, some image files, as well as some files that look like they're junk. Those junk files are the ones that I don't want to copy over. I only want to copy the image files over. In my cold data directory, I've got a bunch of image files, about 100 to be exact. And then in my many files directory, I've also got more image files. In this case, I've got about 400 of them. So let's go ahead and start copying files. We're going to start with our miscellaneous data directory. So I'm going to go to DataSync. And before I start copying files, the first thing that I need to do is activate my agents. So if you remember, I deployed 2 DataSync agents in my Northern California region, but my destination for my data is actually in the Ohio region. So when you're using DataSync, you want to deploy your agents as close to your source data as possible, and you want to activate your agents in the region where you're copying your data to. So in this case, I'm going to activate my agents in the Ohio region. So I'll click on Get Started here, and the first step it's going to take me to is to create an agent. So I've already deployed my agent, so I don't need to do anything there. Now the next step is I need to decide how I want to actually connect my agents to the DataSync service in the destination region, in this case, Ohio. I have 3 options. And the drop down here shows you what those options are. So the first option is a public service endpoint. This means that my agent will connect to the DataSync service over the internet. Now remember, DataSync does all transfers encrypted. All data is transferred over the wire in an encrypted fashion. But you would use this in the case where you don't have a dedicated connection and you just need to use DataSync to transfer data up into the cloud. Now the second option is a FIPS service endpoint. Now FIPS is a federal standard for commonly used by American government agencies, non-military agencies. And so we provide a FIPS compliance endpoint for customers who need that. And then the third option is for customers who do have a dedicated connection up to AWS, either via VPN or AWS Direct Connect, and they want to use that to transfer their data. They don't want to go over the internet. They want to use their dedicated connection. In my case, I'm going to use a public service endpoint to keep things simple. Now, the next step is that I want to activate my agent. So I need to use the IP address of my agent to do this. So I'm going to go back to my CloudFormation output, and I'm going to grab the IP address of my first agent. I'm going to copy that here, and then I'm going to say get key. And what's happening is that my browser is actually connecting to the agent through its public IP address over port 80 and running a quick activation script. Once the activation is successful, the agent will close port 80, it'll stop listening on that port, and it's now saying that it's successfully been activated. So I'm going to give my agent a name. I'm going to call it Agent 1, and I'm going to click on Create Agent. And you see that our agent was successfully created. You can see that it's using a public service endpoint and it's connected to the Ohio US East 2 region. So now I'm going to create my second agent. Again, I'm going to use a public service endpoint, and I'm going to grab the IP address for my second agent. Copy that there. Say get key. And you can see that activation was again successful. I'm going to give this name Agent 2 and create my agent. And again, successfully created, the status is online. So now I have my 2 agents here. So now with my agents successfully activated and created, I can go ahead and create a task for that first folder, miscellaneous data, that I want to copy into EFS. So I'm going to go to click on tasks on the left side of the screen here, and I'm going to click create task. So the first thing that I need to do is I need to specify the locations, a source location and a destination location. I haven't created any locations before now, so I'm going to go ahead and create a location now. So my source is going to be my NFS server, so I'm going to choose NFS. And I'm going to pick which agent I want to use. I could use either one. I'm just going to pick agent 1 for now. And then I need to give it the IP address of my NFS server, again, which I have from my CloudFormation output. So I'm going to copy that, paste it here. And now I need to specify the mount path of how the agent will actually mount the NFS server. And if you remember, our export on our NFS server was media/data. And then I want to specify the specific folder that I'm going to copy data from, which in this case was miscellaneous data. And I'm going to click next. And now I need to specify a destination location. Remember, I want to copy my miscellaneous data to an EFS file system. So I have two types to choose from here, either an EFS file system or an S3 bucket. I'm going to choose EFS file system, and I'm going to select the file system that I've created in the Ohio region. And then I'm going to specify the mount path of where the data is going to be copied to, which in this case is going to be a folder that I pre-created called miscellaneous data. I click next, and then I'm going to give this a name. We're going to call this copy miscellaneous data. And then I have a number of options for my task. So the first set of options are going to tell DataSync how the data should be verified. And I have 3 options. So the first option is simply to check integrity during transfer. DataSync will actually always perform checksums during transfer. So this is the default option if you don't want to do any verification of files after they've been transferred. The second option is to verify only the data that's been transferred. And then the third option is to verify all of the data in the destination and compare it with the source. This is useful in the case where, let's say you're doing a cutover, you're ready to shut down, let's say your on-premises system, and you're ready to completely move over to your destination. In that case, you would want to do kind of a final check, make sure all of the data has been copied correctly. You could use option 3 for that. In this case, I'm going to stick with verifying only the data that's been transferred. So DataSync will not only validate that the data is being transferred in flight, once the data lands in my destination EFS, it will also verify that the data there matches what came from my source NFS server. So the second set of options is around how to copy file metadata. And you have 3 options here: to copy ownership, permissions, and timestamps. In this case, I'm going to keep all of this because I want to maintain all of my metadata on EFS. The third set of options here are around file management and specifies whether or not you want to keep deleted files. So if I delete a file on the source, do I want to keep that file in the destination, or do I also want it to be deleted? And also how to handle overwriting files. So if a file changes in my source, do I want to overwrite it in the destination? For now, this is the first time I'm copying my data, so I'll just keep them set the way they are. This next option controls the bandwidth limit. It specifies how much bandwidth the task should use. So in some cases, you may have a very large pipe from your on-premises environment up into AWS, but that network pipe is shared between different applications that are connecting with the cloud, and you don't want the DataSync task to use up all of that bandwidth. So you can configure how much bandwidth you actually want the task to consume. Now in my case, I'm just going to use whatever is available. And then another option here is around queuing. So we recently added the ability for DataSync to be able to queue tasks. And this is useful in cases where customers want to run multiple tasks on the same agent, because an agent can only execute one task at once. But if you queue up multiple tasks, once one task is complete, DataSync will automatically take care of launching the next task in the queue. I'll just leave that enabled for now. Now the next option gives me the ability to filter which files I want to transfer. Now if you remember, in the miscellaneous data folder, we had some files that ended in .junk. I don't want to transfer those. I only want to transfer my JPEG files. So in this case, I'm going to say filter out anything that ends in .junk. So this is an exclude filter. And so I'm going to specify star.junk there, and that will say don't copy any files that end in that pattern. And then lastly, I'm going to configure logging. So I've set up a CloudWatch log group, and it's important when you specify a log group for DataSync that you also give it resource permissions for DataSync to write to that log group. And for more information on that, you can check out documentation on our product page. So I'm going to go ahead and click Next, and I'm going to just take a look and review and make sure that the settings are the way I expect. So my source location is coming from my NFS folder under miscellaneous data from my one agent. My destination is going to EFS. That all looks good. It's got my task name and my options. You can see my filter in there. So it's going to filter out files that end in .junk. And then my log group is set up, and I'm going to go ahead and click Create Task. DataSync will go ahead and create the task. And sometimes it takes a few seconds to create the task, and sometimes it's immediately available. You can see that my task status says that the task is available. So I'm going to go ahead and click Start. And now what it's prompting me to do is I have the option to override those task options that I set. Every time I execute a task, I have the option to run it with different settings if I choose to. In this case, I'm going to use all of the settings that I had, and I'm just going to go ahead and click Start. Now, when you start a task, it automatically creates what's called a task execution. And if I scroll down to the bottom of my screen here, you can see the execution object that was created. I'm going to click on that, and it's giving me the status of the task. So it's currently in the launching phase, and it tells me how much time has passed since it was created. Now, while that's going on, I'm going to jump back to the slides and talk a little bit about what we just did to set up this task. So to get started, what we did was we deployed the agents, and then we activated them in our destination region. And remember that agents are activated in the region where data will be transferred to. And then the second step, we configured our storage locations. We specified our options. And then third, we started our task, and you have the ability to monitor the progress of that task, either in the DataSync console itself through that task execution that I just showed you, or you can also do it through CloudWatch. And remember that a source and destination location can be an on-premises NFS or SMB file system, it could be an S3 bucket, or it could be an EFS file system. So let's check the status of our task and see where it's at right now. Okay, so we can see that our task is executed successfully. It took about 1 minute and 26 seconds total in duration. You can see that it gives you the total number of file transfers. In this case, there were 20 files transferred, and then there was also metadata about the folder that the files were located in that was transferred as well. So that's where we get the 21 from. So in addition to my NFS server, I also have a command line open to my EFS client. You can see if I type in the mount command that I've mounted my EFS file system on this server. And I'm in my mount directory, and if I do an ls, you can see the miscellaneous data folder where I just copied my data to. So if I do an ls on that directory, you can see that there are only the 20 JPEG files were transferred. The .junk files that were in our source directory were not copied. So our DataSync transfer was successful. Okay, so with that task complete, I want to move on to the next task, which is to copy my data from my cold data folder up into S3 Glacier Deep Archive. So to do that, I'm going to create a new task in DataSync. And again, I'm picking a source location. If you remember with the previous NFS location, we that we created, we specified the miscellaneous data folder. So because of that, I need to create a new NFS location for my new folder. So with this time, I'm going to choose agent 2. Again, I could choose agent 1, but I'm just going to go ahead and run on agent 2. Again, I need the IP address for my NFS server, and then the mount path. So again, it's media data, that's my NFS export, and then I want the subdirectory under there that I actually want to copy the data from, which is the cold data folder. Click next, and then my destination location this time is going to be an S3 bucket. So if you remember here, the name of my S3 bucket was all data bucket. So I'm going to search for that, all data bucket. And then my storage class, I want it to go into S3 Glacier Deep Archive. So I'm going to select that as my storage class. And you notice that DataSync gives us some helpful guidance here. It's reminding us that S3 Glacier Deep Archive is intended for files that are going to be accessed infrequently and are not going to be modified very often. It's also going to let us know that objects that are smaller than 40 kilobytes will end up being stored in S3 standard. And the reason for that is that with Glacier Deep Archive specifically, objects that are smaller than 40 kilobytes are actually charged at a minimum price scale of 40 kilobytes. So if there's something smaller than that, we want to store it in S3 standard to save you some money. And now we're going to specify the folder in the bucket where we want the data to be copied to. So in this case, I'm going to copy it to a folder called cold data. And then I need to specify an IAM role. This is the role that DataSync is going to use to communicate with the S3 bucket and give it the rights and privileges that the DataSync service needs to write data into that bucket. And so I've pre-created a role, and I'm going to use that role. Now, I could also allow the DataSync service to create one for me, but in this case, I had one pre-created, and I'm just going to go ahead and use that. So that was my destination location. And again, I'm going to be given my task options. I'm going to call this task copy cold data. And from an options perspective, I'm going to verify that the data was transferred. I'm going to maintain metadata. I'm copying new data, so I don't really need to worry about deleting files or overwrite files. And I'll keep my bandwidth and queuing options set as they are. I want all of my all of my files to be copied, so I'm not going to enter any exclude patterns of any kind. I'll enable my logging, click next, review, make sure everything looks good. My source is my NFS data under cold data. My destination is my S3 bucket in the Glacier Deep Archive storage class. Options are set correctly, logging is set correctly, and we'll create the task. And we'll give that a minute or two to create. Okay, so we can see that our task shows available, and get the task available, I'm going to go ahead and click start. And again, it's going to prompt me and ask me if I want to change any of my settings. I'm good with what I have, so I click start. And just like we did previously, we're launching a new task, and so it's going to create a task execution object to track the status of our task. So while that's running, I want to talk to you a little bit about how DataSync is optimized to work with S3. So on the back end, when DataSync connects to an S3 bucket, it does so through a local VPC endpoint. So data is not transferred out over the internet. It stays within the region, and it's highly optimized. Now, we talked a little bit previously about using do-it-yourself techniques instead of using DataSync. And there's a lot of work that you have to do if you're going to write data, and particularly a lot of files, into S3. There's all kinds of things that you need to think about. And DataSync takes care of all of them. And if you see below, there's a list there of all the things that DataSync takes care of for you. It takes care of things like multi-part transfers if those are required. It scales out horizontally to maximize performance. It uses VPC endpoints. It takes care of exponential backoff. It parallelizes requests. It deals with retry logic. It does MD5 puts. It can write directly to storage classes, as you just saw. It also does cost optimization, making sure that your objects go into the most optimal storage classes based on cost. And it does things like MIME detection, folder creation, and utilizing IAM roles. So DataSync takes care of all of this for you, things that you would normally have to do on your own if you weren't using DataSync. So now let's check the status of our task. Okay, so we can see that our task completed. Took about 1 minute and 15 seconds. And under files transferred, if you remember, we had 100 files in our cold data folder. So I transferred those 100 files plus information about the cold data folder itself. So if we go to our S3 bucket and we take a look, we do a refresh, and we can see the cold data folder. And if we click on that, we can see the 100 objects that were transferred in. And if you'll notice, if you compare the size and the storage class, you'll see that objects that are greater than 40 kilobytes ended up in the Glacier Deep Archive storage class, while objects that are less than that ended up in the standard storage class. Again, this is done to save you money. If you can scroll down, we just see a various mix of objects. Some are stored in Glacier Deep Archive, some are stored in standard, and there's 100 of them in there. So one of the other things that DataSync does for you is not only does it do bulk transfers, but it also does incremental transfers for you. So you can rerun a task multiple times just to pick up the data that's changed. So I'm going to go back to my NFS server, and I'm going to copy a new file into my cold data directory. So I'm going to copy a file test.dat. You can see that I added this new file over here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to rerun the task that we just ran. And DataSync is going to scan the files in the source and the destination, and it's going to look for just what the differences are. And it's going to notice that there was just one file changed, and it's going to grab that file and send it over. So I'm going to go back to my task. And again, I'm just going to hit start. I don't need to do anything else. It's already configured for the source location and the destination location. It's going to prompt me to ask whether I want to change my options. I'm going to keep things as they are, and I'll hit start. And now it's going to create a new task execution. So now I have two. The first one at the bottom here is the one we just previously ran, the successful one that copied data from our source NFS server into the S3 bucket. And now I've executed a new one, and it's currently in the launching phase. The incremental transfer of data for us. All I had to do was rerun the task. I didn't have to make any changes to it. DataSync was smart enough to know what the changes were and only transfer the changes as part of that task execution. Okay, so we've copied files from our miscellaneous data folder up into EFS. We've copied files from our cold data folder up into S3 Glacier Deep Archive. And now we need to run our final copy job, which is to copy data out of our many files directory and up into S3 standard. So I'm going to go ahead and create a third task. You can see the previous tasks I've created here. So I'm going to create a new task. And again, I'm going to create a new location, a new source location for my NFS server because I have a new folder to copy from. So I'm going to choose NFS. Now this time, because I have a lot of files, I can actually select both agents to run from. And this is really useful in the cases where if you've got hundreds of thousands or millions of files, you can actually scale out your task over multiple agents and do lots of parallel jobs, lots of file copies in parallel. And again, I'm going to use my NFS IP address. And my mount path, remember, was media/data. And my source folder this time is going to be called many files. Click next. And my destination location is my S3 bucket. And I'm going to choose my all data bucket. Now this time, instead of choosing Glacier Deep Archive, I'm going to choose standard. Remember, I wanted to make these objects available to me more frequently. I'm going to put them in a folder in my bucket called many files. And then I'm going to choose my existing IAM role, click Next, give my task a name, copy many files, and I'm going to keep all of my options the same. I don't want to set any of my change any of my options by default. I want to copy all of the files. Remember, there were 400 JPEG files in that folder. I want to copy all of those. I'm going to do my logging, and I'll click Next. Check it. This time you can see that now I have 2 agents listed on my source location. Destination location is my S3 bucket. Going to standard. Everything else looks good. I'll hit create task. And our task is creating, and we'll come back here in a minute. Okay, so our task has been created successfully. It's marked as available. So I'm going to click start. Again, I'm going to keep all of my settings. Click start again. And this is a new task. So it's going to create a new task execution. And it's in the launching phase. So let's talk a little bit more about some of the options that you have for setting up DataSync agents on-prem. So as we showed, you can have multiple DataSync agents pointing to a single source location and copying up into the cloud. But you could also have different DataSync agents in different locations pointing to the same region and either going to the same destination or different destinations, depending upon what you needed. In addition, you can also have a single DataSync agent that copies from multiple locations. You would just create different tasks with different locations, in this case, users and media, and you would specify whatever destination locations you wanted to use. DataSync is designed to be flexible in its deployment to meet the needs of your data transfer requirements. Whether you're copying from multiple data sources or from a single data source and you need to scale out, DataSync is designed to meet whatever your transfer needs may be. Okay, so let's go check the status of our task. Okay, so we can see that our task executed successfully. Took about 1 minute and 44 seconds, and this time you can see that 400 files were transferred, again, in addition to information about the folder that those files were stored in. Gives you how much data was transferred and roughly the file throughput and data throughput. So now let's go back to our S3 bucket. We'll go to the top of our bucket and we'll do a refresh. You can see our many files folder is in here now. And you can see that we have lots and lots and lots of JPEG files transferred over. So DataSync was able to quickly and efficiently copy those many files into our S3 bucket. So we've copied all of our data over. We've now got it securely stored either in EFS or in S3. So now let's review some of the architectural guidance as you go out and you start to use DataSync for your own transfer needs. So the first is, remember that DataSync is optimized for speed. So it's going to use as much bandwidth as you give it. In fact, one agent can fill a 10 gigabit per second network link. So if that's not desired, if you need to share that link with other applications or other programs, you'll want to turn on bandwidth throttling at the task level. Remember that DataSync supports a number of methods for connecting the agent to the DataSync service. You don't have to go over the internet if you don't want to. You can use private link if you have a VPN or direct connect connection up into AWS. DataSync is also useful for not just moving data into the cloud, but for moving data out of the cloud. We have some customers who have workflows where they generate some data on premises, they need to copy it up into the cloud, process that data, and then bring it back down. And they use DataSync both for copying the data up and copying the data back down. DataSync you can create tasks to copy in either direction. As we showed, DataSync can copy directly to low-cost S3 storage classes. So this is really useful and helps you to avoid the costs associated with lifecycling your data from one storage class to another. As we showed, you can transfer data using multiple DataSync agents to scale out when you have hundreds of thousands, millions, or even more than that files that you need to transfer up into the cloud. Another use case that's common is for customers to use DataSync for EFS to EFS migration. So this is the case where they want to move, either make a copy of their data into a second file system, or maybe they want to migrate to a larger file system or a different file system. DataSync is really useful in that use case. We also talked about how tasks can be queued to run on the same agent. So using DataSync, you can run multiple tasks on the same agent. When one task is finished executing, DataSync will automatically launch the next task in the queue. And finally, remember that a single agent can work with multiple sources. You just create different tasks with different locations, and you can run those on the same agent. So if you want to learn more, check out our product site at aws.amazon.com/datasync. You'll find lots of helpful resources on there. You also see that we have a page with some blogs, pointing to some blogs that we've written that go into more details on some of the features that we've talked about today. And we also have a GitHub website where you can go to run through various workshops to learn more and get some hands-on experience with DataSync yourself. And that's it. I just want to thank you for your time today and have a great day.